Welcome back to the channel. Today we're taking another big step in the people's build where you, my subscribers, are in the driver's seat of deciding on how this cafe racer comes to life. My name is David and welcome to Z's Garage. One of the most exciting parts of a cafe racer, or a design aspect that really defines what a cafe racer is a seat cowl. And seat cowls can be designed in any which way. But with your input and your creative direction, we have landed on a design. 3D printing allows us to really just print this with really good precision and allows us to be really creative with the design that maybe would be pretty difficult to get with metal. To get started, we need to translate our ideas into a CAD file and shape this final piece, and then we need to 3D print it. So let's head into design software and make your choices into reality. Wow, it's like very, very salesman of me. Look at that, power hands. Choices into reality. All right, let's get into design.
All right, one of the first things you're going to do is we're going to choose the face form, and we're going to click on the very right. We're going to hit object snap, and we're going to create our first solid box. We're going to choose from the left to the right, then go down and go back across, and we have our first form. Once we have our first form, we're going to rotate the motorcycle because we want our form around the seat pan to kind of mold around those two bars running across to the back. So we're going to freeform a little bit down. And that'll create a nice rounded seat pan to go right on top of our frame. I wouldn't worry too much about the way it looks at first. A lot of times we're going to make some adjustments. If our form kind of goes inside the frame, we'll go ahead and pull that out and have it sit a lot better. We're going to go ahead and try to add a little bit more form or face. It can be kind of hard to find your point, so you just kind of got to play around with it, see where it magnetically touches, but eventually you'll get it. So here I'm just trying to line it up, make sure it's like pretty somewhat straight. Then we're going to go to the other side and we're going to do the exact same thing. All right, we're going to go ahead and pull the frame out here. We're going to hit the modify tool. I like to use this little square to manually move things up and down. It just allows for easier movement. We'll take another point and we will bring this out just a little bit more. The goal is to basically just have it float right on top of our mold. So once we get it to a point where we like it, we'll extend this out and push our form out and stretch it. Before we extrude the seat pan, we're going to go ahead and add an edge to the seat pan right to the middle. Adding this edge will make a lot more sense once we get to the actual seat cowl, because we're going to need a couple lines to help us extrude the cowl. It'll all make sense once we get to that point. Just trust the process. Go ahead and add an edge. Once you add an edge, we're going to go ahead and mirror our seat pan. It's just a lot easier when you mirror things. Just you edit one side and it'll edit the other side automatically. We're going to add or extrude our seat pan now. Make sure you grab the whole entire line on the edge, and we're going to extrude about 600 to 700 millimeters. And then we're going to play around, make sure we kind of expand our seat pan to be on the outside of our frame. And these are all going to be really minor adjustments. You're just going to go back and forth, just take it really slow, play around with it. Sometimes it takes me an hour to do a design, and sometimes it takes me 7 to 8 hours. So it just takes time. We'll go ahead and extrude some more and keep doing this process.
Before we get more into the CAD design, you might be wondering how I got the 3D scan of the motorcycle. Well, I want to introduce to you the OnStar Vega, a 3D scanner that's taken my motorcycle projects to the next level. This thing is an absolute game changer. Why? Because it let me scan my bike with extreme accuracy. And the best part is that you don't even need a computer to use it, because the Vega has a gigantic responsive touchscreen that makes things really simple. Everything you need to control the scan is right there in your hands. No extra cables, no lugging around a laptop. Just set it up, scan, and you're good to go. With the scan loaded into CAD, I'm able to design the cowl and seat pan really easily. There's no need for calipers, there's no need to measure anything, no need to build a mock-up. It's just scan and throw it into AutoFusion 360 or whatever program you use and design it. So if you're into custom builds or designing any sort of parts that need some sort of 3D scanner and you're tired of measuring and pulling out the calipers, check out the OnStar Vega. With the precision and just the all-in-one unit, made it so much easier. Takes a little bit to kind of learn at first, maybe just like 10-15 minutes of just kind of learning and reading the instructions, but once you do, it's easy going. So check it out, link is in the bio. Let's get back to the CAD file.
So we have our seat pan. Next up, we're gonna go ahead and insert more edges. This is where, trusting the process is important. Inserting more edges allows us to extend the top part of the cowl. So we're gonna extend 2 different edges, or 4 total. Since we're mirroring, we only have to insert 1 edge and it'll do it automatically on the other side. Once we do that, we're going to go ahead and grab our line right here. Make sure to grab the whole entire line, because if you only grab 2 and you're mirroring, it won't be welded in the middle and it'll be separated. Once we do that, we can modify it. Then we could grab our box, and I believe it's Command Option. We could extrude that way. We're going to extrude up. Then we're going to extrude a little bit back right over here. And then we're going to extrude another one. And then lastly, we're going to extrude to the frame. That looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. I went ahead and grabbed the sides already. We're going to modify it. We're going to extrude that as well with Command Option for MacBook users. And we're going to kind of follow the cowl with the amount of point of contacts. This will be important for symmetry. If you create too many points of contact, when you weld this all together, it's not exactly going to be easy to weld, and you're going to have some unweldable points. So we're going to follow our points of contact, and then we'll weld it. But before we do that, once I rotate this, you'll see that we have to bring this up. Okay, so now we have to bring this bottom area up and line it up with the frame. So we'll hit the modify tool and we will just raise it up a little bit, make some minor adjustments, extend that out. Go ahead and bring this point out and then bring that up a little bit and just trying to line it up best I can with the frame. Just want to make sure it looks pretty decent, nice and tight against the frame. once we get to a point where we like it, we're going to go ahead and weld these points all together. So first we're going to weld around our frame and just make sure. I have to kind of separate these a little bit because it's hard to weld it. Oh, I got it. Perfect. Okay, now weld that to this point. And this is where extruding the appropriate amount is going to be super important, because if you have too many points between these boxes compared to your top of your cowl, then it's going to be hard to weld those. You're going to have some weird gaps. If you hit Control 1 or Control 3, I can't remember exactly, it goes to box layered. We're just going to play around with it and try to get some of these lines a little bit cleaned up. We'll go ahead and bring this out a little bit. I think it was a little bit too close to the frame. We'll bring this out a little bit. Luckily with the mirroring, it makes it really easy, so the other side will come out. It's looking pretty good, looking like it's going to take shape pretty well. Go ahead and grab and just play around with it. You're more than welcome to try things, move it around, see if it works, see if it doesn't work, and just kind of make it your own. One of the areas to create good symmetry is to kind of try to create better lines. I think extending this out will create a better flow. So we're just going to pull this out just a little bit, and then we're going to go ahead and pull this out a little bit. I think this will be a great flow. Next up, we're going to hit our form tool, our form face tool. We're going to object snap, and we're going to select our point. We're going to select there, and here. Should create a solid body. Now we're going to select here, 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 and here, and it'll create another solid body. And the last area that we need to do. Then the last area, we're going to select here, down here, and create a solid square. But going into smooth mode, it's a little bit smoother. Definitely some hard points, but there's some interesting creases. For some reason, some areas crease and some areas don't crease. So what we'll do is we'll uncrease, just need to find it. We'll uncrease it, some of these areas, and it should just smoothen out a lot better and look a lot smoother. Okay, it's taking shape pretty good. We're at a point where I'm almost pretty happy with it. The only thing is, I think I'm going to go ahead and insert a couple edges just to, I think it'll expand the top part so it'll be less of a pyramid shape with a flat top and more of a rounded. And this is what I mean. I added a couple lines right here, just in these areas, and it really just created such a better shape. More of that traditional style. I think that looks pretty good, and then we'll go ahead and add a crease to make it that classic style cafe racer with the hoop in the back, or the cowl. So I'm pretty happy with that. I think that looks really good. Creates like an interesting shape, and yeah, let's 3D print it. All right, so we have our 3D prints all glued up and ready to go, but we need to sand everything down. When you sand, you're not just smoothing out the surface of the 3D print, you're actually creating tiny scratches that gives the epoxy something to grip onto. Without that texture, the epoxy can't bond properly and you risk peeling or flaking off down the line. So better to sand and get it a little scratched up. Plus, sanding removes any surface imperfections or oils from the print, so you're getting a cleaner, stronger finish. It's a little extra work, but it goes a long way for durability and looks. Everything's sanded down, we go ahead and put some acetone. Thank you, honey, for the nail polish remover / acetone. I will buy you another bottle. But we're gonna get acetone all over this thing. We're gonna wipe it down, make sure we're getting all the oils and residue off. And then we're gonna epoxy this. All right, so I'm using the same epoxy that I used for our carbon forging project for the triple tree. I don't know if this is the appropriate epoxy to use, but it's what I have in my shop, so that's what I'm going to use. Once I coat the entire seat pan and cowl, it's pretty much just let it get tacky, and then you just start putting the chopped carbon on top. I start patting it down just to allow it to really just get it into the epoxy and really just seat it in there, so then it just doesn't come out easily. Once I finish laying all the chopped carbon on top of it, I start putting some epoxy and I start dabbing all that carbon into the seat cowl. Kind of like what I did with the triple tree and dabbing it into the mold. I'm kind of just doing the same process as that. Just pour some epoxy, dab the chopped carbon, make sure it just gets really seated in there and pretty saturated. Once we get the chopped carbon all saturated and everywhere where we want it, we are going to apply a fiberglass peel ply. And this peel ply is just going to really allow us to get a really even surface. Once it's laid down, we can use a metal roller and get all that chopped carbon fiber to lay really, really flat. And it's going to bond a lot better. It's going to create way, way less sanding, and that makes me happy. So we're gonna put this and just make it really even. After about 24 hours of curing, you can get rid of the peel ply. I do want to say the peel ply is just, it's a huge, huge benefit. When you lay it over your epoxy, it really soaks up the excess resin and it leaves this perfect texture surface once you peel it off. And to be honest, you don't really have to sand any of this texture down. You could lay another coat and sand that coat, but I like to sand it down just to make it even more flat, and then I can do another coat of chopped carbon and resin. It also keeps the surface really clean by protecting it from dust, so it's just really good to have. So it saves you a ton of time. All right, we're on to our second layer of chopped carbon for the seat pan and cowl. The first layer really gave us the shape and structure, but this second layer adds even more strength and durability, especially in some of these high stress areas, specifically where the 3D printed parts were glued together or epoxied together. Chopped carbon is great because it conforms to really tight curves and tricky spots where traditional carbon weave might struggle with some of these curves. It fills in gaps and builds up thickness without adding a ton of weight, which we're not too concerned about, but chopped carbon, so saves weight. And this is where patience really pays off. A smooth, consistent second layer means less sanding later and a stronger, more professional result. You got to trust the process. It's worth it. Well, now it's time to sand and sand and sand and sand some more. This step is all about getting the perfect smooth surface before we add this final coat of epoxy on. Even if it looks pretty good now, there's always room for some improvement with sanding. Sanding removes any real high spots, drips, or imperfections that might have crept in during the curing process. I'm using a little bit finer sandpaper. I think I'm using like a 220 grit to really get these layers and just take my time so I don't kind of burn through or cut through the epoxy and get to the carbon. Basically just enough to even it out and give this surface a nice uniform texture. Once it's smooth, I'll wipe it down with my wife's acetone, and honey, I promise I will buy you another bottle. And then we'll get rid of all that dust. This step is really crucial because any leftover dust can ruin the finish of your final coat. You really just did all that work, so might as well just take your time cleaning it. And then for the final coat, I'm going with a really thick layer of epoxy. This will give a piece of deep, glossy finish while also sealing and protecting it. Think of it as like a icing on a cake. It's what takes it from functional to show-stopping. And the key here is patience. You want to work slowly, avoiding bubbles and making sure everything is coated evenly. Once this cures, it'll leave us with a really high gloss finish, and I think it's going to look really, 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 really good.
And there it is. The seat cowl and pan look so good. I'm really excited about it. The carbon, the chopped carbon looks really fantastic with the epoxy. Everything turned out like great. Still need to do a little bit of sanding and I need to mount it up, but I could always do that in another video, just kind of little things that need to get done. And I'm just really happy, especially with the Einstar Vega, just scanning it and then 3D printing and then the chopped carbon with epoxy. Everything just turned out really good and I'm just really pleased with it. But this is honestly just the beginning. Now that the seat is dialed in, I'm gonna be starting some rear sets and I'll be using the Einstar Vega to 3D scan, and then I will be designing in CAD and making these from scratch. And to be honest, I'm probably gonna be doing some carbon forging with the rear sets. I think it can be done and it can be mounted on the bike. So stay tuned for the next video. Let me know if you guys like these long form videos as well. Kind of need some feedback with that. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. Greatly appreciate every single one of you. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.